Ladies and gentlemen, Capital G back at it with Valentin, Dean of the Vein. Before we dive into the tech, of course, all the likes and the subs if you enjoy what we're doing here. Please and thank you. Working towards the magic numbers if we can. Still got a long way to go, but we can get there with your help. Also, don't forget to come join the Discord group, Dungeons and Cardboard. It's our LGS away from our LGS. Free to join, free to play. No excuses. Lots of great people for Magic, for Flesh and Blood as well. Just ran our first Flesh and Blood tournament, in fact, so hopefully more of those to come, judging by the people who did participate this past weekend. It was a great time. And of course, you might, if you don't run into me, you may run into Bulldog. He's been doing some Resident Evil Village over on his channel, so be sure to check that out as well. And one more shout out. Gonna shout out Original Caesar today, as he was the one who suggested Valentin, like just a general suggestion in the Dungeons and Cardboard Discord group. Just randomly suggested, let's do a Valentin, Dean of the Vein, only one drop stack. That's what we're doing today, only one drops. So yeah, let's take that sip of water and dive right in. So, Valentin, of course, Menace and Lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When we do, we have the opportunity to pay 2 mana and create a pest. Whenever the pest dies, we gain a life. Cool, pretty straightforward stuff. Also, it's an MDFC, so we always have the option of casting Lizette instead. I'm not going to talk about Lizette too much here because, spoiler alert, the next video is going to be Lizette focused. This one is just going to focus on the Valentin side, but there are some synergies in this list with Lizette, so if ever the need arises to cast the green side of this card, there's nothing to actually stop you. But we're playing 1-drops, so let us focus on Valentin and, well, the 31 other creatures that Valentin is working with in the deck. Before we talk about the creatures, I do want to talk about a couple of the artifacts that we're running. Namely, Aether Vial, which at the beginning of our upkeep, we may put a charge counter on the Aether Vial. But once we have 1 charge counter on there, we're done. That's all we need. Because then we can tap the Vial, put a creature card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Aether Vial from our hand into play. Now, reducing the cost of one of our creatures from 1 mana to 0 mana, not really a big deal. Reducing the cost of our creatures from 1 mana to 0 mana at instant speed? Now we're talking. The other artifact I wanted to focus on here is Instrument of the Bards. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can put a Harmony counter on Instrument of the Bards. Again, we only need 1 counter, and once we have it, we can pay 4, tap, and search our library for a creature card with mana value 1. Put it in our hand. So we have 31 creatures in the deck, and this can tutor for all of them. So yep. So the creatures that I've decided to go with, and we'll go in reverse alphabetical here. We're going to start with the Viscera Seer, of course, the classic EDH sack outlet, sack a creature, scry 1. Running the Thrull Parasite. A reminder on Extort, by the way, that Orzhov mana symbol appears in the reminder text, which explains how Extort works. It does not contribute to the card's color identity when it is in the reminder text. So yes, I can play a Thrull Parasite in this deck. Now we're clear on that. Extort being, of course, we can pay a black. Well, whenever we cast a spell, we can pay a black to have each of our opponents lose life, and we gain that much life. Awesome. And for 2, and by tapping and paying 2 life, we can remove a counter from a non-land permanent. So if somebody's going nuts on something, say +1/+1 counter happy, or maybe someone's got a cool saga and we just don't want it to get to chapter 3 for whatever reason, Thrull Parasite. moving on up to Tenacious Dead, which when this dies, we may pay 2 mana to return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Yes, because all of our spells are 1 mana, we're going to have a lot of, shall we say, mana-intensive abilities that we get to use. Sparring Construct. When this dies, put a 1/1 counter on target creature we control. Simic Initiate has Graft 1, which means when this dies, we can move the +1/+1 counter to another creature. Servant of the Scale. Basically the same thing, just with a lot more words. Scoop Mob. If we control 5 or more lands, we get to put 4 +1/+1 counters on this on each of our upkeeps. A big dumb beater for us. Sanitarium Skeleton. Pay 3 mana to return this from our graveyard to our hand. Ravenous Squirrel. 3 mana, sacrifice an artifact or creature to gain us a life and a card. Also, whenever we sacrifice an artifact or a creature, this gets a +1/+1 counter, so it feeds itself quite nicely. Persistent Specimen. 3 mana to return this from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Ovaya Pashiri. People don't play her as a commander very often, probably because her name is hard to pronounce, and also because there is a Selesnya elf that's similar, but not quite the same. I do still like her here, though. Green and 2 to create a 1/1 servo artifact creature token, or a green and 4 to create an XX construct, where X is the number of creatures we control. Sweet. Nurturer Initiate. Whenever a player plays a green spell, we could pay 1 to have target creature get +1/+1 until end of turn. Mold Adder. Whenever an opponent casts a blue or black spell, this gets a +1/+1 counter. Again, another big dumb beater for us. On that topic, Hex Drinker. For our single mana at sorcery speed, we can level it up. Once it gets to a certain amount of level counters, it becomes a 4/4 with protection from instants. Once we get to 8 counters or more, it becomes a 6/6 with protection from everything. Hex Parasite. For Phyrexian mana and X, we can remove up to X counters from a permanent. So, if one of our opponents are going +1/+1 counter crazy, we can take away all those counters. Gutter Bones. Enters the battlefield tapped. We could pay a black and 1 to return this from our graveyard to our hand, but only during our turn and only if an opponent lost life. We've got more than enough creatures. We're going wide. We should be able to get through with something. Gnarled Scarhide. It's a 2/1. It cannot block, but it has Bestow, so we can actually cast this as an aura for 4 mana. And we don't have to enchant our creature with it. We can enchant our creature, make it bigger, but unable to block. Or we can enchant an opponent's creature and make it bigger, but unable to block. And then whenever the creature is enchanting leaves the battlefield, we get the Gnarled Scarhide back as a creature on our side of the board. Sweet. Gilded Goose. Comes into play, gives us a food token. We can make more food tokens with it, or we can change that food token into mana. The food tokens themselves, of course, we can always sacrifice for life gain if we need it. Ghostlit Stalker. This is a nasty one. 4 black and tap, target player discards 2 cards. So it's expensive, but because our spells are so cheap, I don't mind paying for this ability. Also, if especially we come down to a 1/1 and we draw this late, black and 5 discard this from our hand to have target player discard 4 cards. That's devastating late in the game, especially if our opponent isn't adept at drawing cards and refilling their hand. Foulmire Knight. So, a friendly reminder on how these adventure cards work. We have the option of straight up casting it as a 1/1 Death Touch, or we can cast it as Profane Insight. If we cast it as Profane Insight at 3 mana instant, that draws us a card and loses us a life. This goes on an adventure, basically is exiled, but we can cast the regular portion of the card from exile. So we can still do both things. That same philosophy goes to the Flaxen Intruder. Its regular cast is a 1/2 human berserker that when this deals combat damage to a player, we can sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. Alternatively, if we have 7 mana late in the game, we can cast Welcome Home and get a bunch of bears. Elvish Reclaimer, 1/2 for 1, gets +2/+2 as long as there are 3 or more land cards on our graveyard. And 2 tap, sacrifice a land to go search our library for any land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, and shuffle our library. And that is especially important in this deck, that we can go get any land we want. You'll see why shortly. Elvish Herder for a little bit of politics. For green mana, we can give any creature trample until end of turn. One of our opponents attacks another. They chump. We can give the bigger attacking creature trample if we so chose to. Might make some friends and deals that way. Elves of Deep Shadow. Taps for black. Yes, we take some pain for it, but that's fine. Dread Malkin. It looks like it's supposed to be pronounced as one word, but when you pronounce the syllables, it feels like it's 3 different words. Nonetheless, it's a zombie cat with menace, and we can sacrifice other creatures to give it a bunch of 1/1 counters and make it humongous. Disciple of the Vault. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. So many treasures, blood tokens, food tokens, clues running around. And the number of things keeps going up and up and up. Disciple of the Vault's going to put in work. Deathrite Shaman. Except, well, we all know it. One of the best 1-drops in the game. For those that don't, tap it, exile a land from a graveyard. We get a mana. Black, tap, exile an instant or sorcery from a graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. Or green, tap, exile a creature card from a graveyard to gain 2 life. Costa Caterpillar. We can sacrifice this to pop an artifact or enchantment. Brown Oomph. We can pay for the ability and tap this to counter an activated ability from an artifact. Bloodsoaked Champion. It can't block, and we can always pay the 2 mana to return this from our graveyard to the battlefield if we've attacked with a creature this turn. And lastly, the Almighty Brushwag. 1/1 trample. We can dump any extra mana we have into this to make this humongous. Let's look at our remaining artifacts, shall we? Let's start with the Blood Fountain. When this enters the battlefield, we get a blood token. We can sacrifice the blood token to pitch a card and draw a card. Later on in the game, we can pay 4 tap and sacrifice this to go get 2 creature cards from our graveyard back to our hand. The Bloodforged Battle Axe. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, we get another Bloodforged Battle Axe. So, dumping all of our mana into equipping 3, 4, 5 Bloodforged Battle Axes to our commander. I like that idea. I also like the idea of equipping our commander with a commander's plate. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that is not in our commander's color identity. So, just a reminder that even though Valentin is a mono-black creature, because Lizette's on the backside, it's still black and green for the purpose of commander's plate. It still grants us protection from white, from red, and from blue. That's nothing to scoff at. The Executioner's Capsule. 1 black to throw it down, a black, a generic, and tap and sack, destroy target non-black creature. Expedition Map. 2 tap, sack, go get any land card from our library, put it in our hand. Masterwork of Ingenuity. For 1 mana, copy the best equipment that's on the board. It could be, say, our commander's plate. It could be someone else's sword. Who knows? Whatever it may be, let's copy it. Skull Clamp, of course. Lots of 1 toughness creatures as we've seen, so we can equip it, let it die, draw some cards. Soul Guide Lantern. When this enters the battlefield, we get to exile a card from a graveyard. Then we can tap and sacrifice the lantern to exile each opponent's graveyard. One of the best graveyard hate cards in the game. And if we're really not worried about opponents' graveyards for whatever reason, we can always pay 1 tap and sack this to draw a card. Springleaf Drum will throw this down, and then all of a sudden we can tap this and one of our creatures for mana of any color. Running the Vorpal Sword. 1 mana equipment, double black to equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Death Touch. But it's the fact that if we manage to get a whole bunch of mana and we manage to swing in unblocked at someone with this sword, we can knock someone out straight up, regardless of their life total. Our last artifact will be Witch's Cauldron. 1 black to throw down. A black, a 1 tap and sacrifice a creature. Gain a life and draw a card. Over to enchantments with Abundant Growth. Enchant one of our lands, and now can tap for mana of any color. Also, the fact that the Abundant Growth draws us a card on ETB is pretty sweet. Rockin' the Keen Sense. Whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to an opponent, we may draw a card. Yes, please. A Phyrexian Reclamation. 2 mana, 2 life, return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. And this being an enchantment, we can repeat this whenever we need it. Rancor. Of course, we're going to throw this on one of our creatures. Give it +2/+0 and trample. And whenever this is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. Sixth Sense. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, we may draw a card. Soul Stair Expedition. Has a landfall trigger, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we may put a quest counter on the expedition. Then remove 3 of these quest counters and sacrifice the expedition to return 2 creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. So again, some pretty efficient recursion for us. The Squirrel Sanctuary. 1 green enchantment. When this enters the battlefield, we get a squirrel. And whenever a non-token squirrel we control dies, well, non-token creature, sorry, that we control dies, we can pay 1 mana to return the Squirrel Sanctuary back to our hand. Vampiric Rites. 1 and a black, sack a creature, gain a life and draw a card. Fantastic. Going over to instants and sorceries, we're going to have a crop rotation. 1 green, sack a land, go get any land, put it onto the battlefield. Fatal Push. Destroy target creature if its converted mana costs 2 or less. If a permanent we control has left the battlefield this turn, we can still get something that's 4 or less. Nature's Claim. To destroy an artifact or enchantment. Yes, its controller gains 4 life. Still fits our deck's mana restriction. Spoils of Blood. For 1 mana, put an XX black horror creature token onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. Somebody rafts, we've got an open black mana. Boom. Tragic Slip. Give a creature -1/-1. No, wait. When something else dies, give a creature -13/-13 until end of turn. Vendetta. Destroy a non-black creature. Cannot be regenerated. Lose life equal to that creature's toughness. So, a little restricted that we cannot get our opponent's black creatures. But it's a pretty efficient kill spell for 1 mana. Vines of Vastwood. Target creature cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. Nice. We can pay a 2nd green as the kicker. If we pay the kicker, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. Our sorceries will include Blood Reckoning. For 1 black mana, return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. If the spell's kicked, we get 2 creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. Blood Chief's Thirst. 1 black with a kicker of black and 2. Destroy target creature or planeswalker if converted mana costs 2 or less. If the spell was kicked, instead destroy target creature or planeswalker straight up. Innocent Blood. 1 black mana. Each player sacrifices a creature. Reanimate. Find the best thing in our opponent's graveyards. Pay the 1 black and get it. Now, of course, this is very conditional just simply because our commander can, in fact, exile our opponent's creatures. But if they still manage to get something big into their graveyard at some point over the course of the game, well, we can take it. Spark Harvest. We can either sacrifice a creature or we can pay the additional mana to destroy target creature or planeswalker. Also rocking an Unearth. To return target creature card with converted mana costs 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Alright, now for lands. And not only is this an oops all 1-drops deck, but Dana Roach, I don't know if Dana Roach would be proud of me, or if he'd be like, dude, that's too much even for me. But no basics. There are no basic lands in this deck. So we're running 34 lands and not a single basic. The ones we went with are Access Tunnel, which target creature of power 3 or less cannot be blocked this turn. The Blooming Marsh, Bojuka Bog, another way to exile our opponent's graveyards if need be. Bonder's Enclave, which we can use to draw a card if we manage to equip one of our creatures, make them nice and big. Castle Locthwain, another way to draw cards out of our mana base. Running the Command Tower. Cryptic Caves. We can pay 1, tap and sack this, draw a card, but only if we already have 5 or more lands. That's fine. Yes, we are running Dark Depths. Again, we have tons of excess mana that we're not spending it turn to turn because we're not casting big spells. So, and a Dark Depth enters the battlefield with 10 ice counters on it. We may very well remove them all just by paying mana into it and getting our big old Merit Lage token. Dark Warp Halfway. Do we need a black or do we need a green? Whichever side of this we want, we can get. Dark Moss Bridge, an artifact land, comes into play tapped, is indestructible and gives us our colors. Deathcap Glade, the slow land, is here as well. Drownyard Temple. There might be occasions where we need to sack a land or something. This is the one I want to sack, because then we can pay 3 mana and bring it right back onto the battlefield. Every land is different, so Field of the Dead. Duh. Gaia Reach Sanitarium. Each player draws a card and discards a card. Yes, please. Grim Backwoods. Another creature sack outlet in our mana base that draws us some cards. Hall of Oracles. Taps for colorless. We can filter mana through it for any color we want. Or we can tap it and put a 1/1 counter on target creature, but only if we've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. Still, just the incidental possibility of a +1/+1 counter is nice. Hive of the Eye Tyrant. One of the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms manlands. We can pay 4 mana and turn this into a 3/3 Beholder with Menace. Jungle Hollow. Taps for our colors, gains us a life on ETB. Lair of the Hydra. I like this one. Green X to make the Lair of the Hydra an XX creature until end of turn. Amazing. Llanowar Reborn for the Graft. Llanowar Waste gives us both our colors at the cost of some pain. Nurturing Peatland gives us both of our colors. Yes, we have to pay a life for it, but that's fine. We can always eventually cash this in. 1 tap, sack, draw a card. Opal Palace. So the more times we cast our commander, the more +1/+1 counters this will give our commander. Overgrown Tomb. Of course, we're running the Shock here because it gives us both our colors. Pendlehaven. So many of our creatures are 1/1, so just a land that we can tap to give one of our 1/1s a boost. Of course. Temple of Malady. Get the Scry. Thespian Stage, because yes, we're running Dark Depths, so let's turn our Thespian Stage into a Dark Depths. Undergrowth Stadium. We have 2 or more opponents. This comes into play on tapped and gives us our manas. Running the Orborg to make our black mana perfect. War Room. 3 mana and pay life equal to the number of colors and our commander's color identity to draw a card. So basically 3, tap this, pay 2 life to draw a card. Again, in the mana base is pretty good. West Vale Abbey. Tap, well, it's 5 tap, pay a life to get a cleric. But eventually we can sacrifice those clerics to make Ormondal. So again, just a nice little back pocket thing in our mana base. We got a lot of that going on. The Witherbloom Campus, we can pay 4 tap this to scry 1. I don't want to have to use this ability, but at least we have it. Woodland Cemetery. Likely enters the battlefield tap, but that's fine. Still gives us our colors. And lastly, Yavimaya to make our green mana perfect. And that brings us to the end of our Valentin Oops Only 1-drops Oops No Basics deck. I definitely do not recommend building a deck without basics, but we had some fun with this list, shall we say. The next list is going to be Lizette. It's going to be a little more traditional in its construction, of course. And, well, I think just for a fact, because this is a night recording, I want to make sure the Lizette deck is a daytime recording, because it just makes sense. On that, I'm going to wish everyone good night, and I will see you all again next time. Bye for now.